Welcome to Third Chances, a talk show where we like to hear from people who devoted their life to health, fitness and wellness. Medical professionals, health coaches and all the others who help us every day to cure our body, mind or soul. Those who always look for more natural, holistic ways to help even more people to live a happier and healthier life. Those who don't like to give up easily and settle on you or themselves. It is never too late or too soon. I always believe that every one of us deserves not just a second chance, but as many as we need. I'm Vera, your host. Who better than a master of reinvention with an accent to guide you through it, right? Just like they say, you are not a tree, so move. And God knows I have done just that in my own life many times. If you are not completely happy with the direction your life is going, this show may help you get the courage to change what is needed, find a new path and take charge. So come on over, pour yourself a glass of wine and spend some time with us. Let's laugh and cry together and get inspired by people just like you and me who overcame their own doubts and took a leap of faith to reinvent their life on their own terms. I hope and pray that we help you on that journey. And if you feel so compelled and inspired, please let us know. Don't be shy. Who knows? You may just be our next featured guest with another inspiring success story. So here we go. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Third Chances. And today's guest is my big honor. It's Dr. Lee Ostler. And I was blessed to meet him first time last year in Las Vegas in person. That's when I got involved with this company called Asea, and his book was one of the first thing I reached for to get a better understanding what all this redox signaling molecules it's all about. Dr. Lee Ostler, DDS, is a general dentist in Richland, Washington. He graduated from University of Washington Dental School in Seattle. He is a founder and past president of the American Academy for Oral Systemic Health, a past clinical instructor, and an author of numerous books on oral systemic healthcare. Like I said, we met first time in convention last year in Las Vegas. He is a redox educator and sits on the Asea Medical Professionals Board, and wrote 2 books on cellular health and redox biology that helped myself to understand all this better. One of his books is called Redox Matters, and the other that just came out is called Healthy Matters. He also manages the redoxmatters.com website. Dr. Lee, it's such an honor to have you here today. Thank you so much for making time. I know how crazy busy you are. Thank you so for making time for our podcast.
Thanks, Vera. It's such a pleasure to be with you. You're doing such a great work, and I'm honored to be with you.
Thank you. You were really the first person I looked for some guidance, because I'm one of those, I can't compare your titles with any of mine. I'm self-learned on everything in my life. But when I first was introduced to redox and I saw its effects on myself, I was looking for validation. I was looking for more information, a little more scientifically based, to kind of assure myself before I even open my mouth and share it with anybody else, because I wanted to make sure that this is not something crazy that's gonna go away. And your book that I have right here, and I recommend everybody to read if they are seriously trying to understand this. It's called Redox Matters, Connecting the Dots Between Redox Biology and Health. And it's really helped me because it's fantastically researched book, yet is written the way that even normal folks like me can understand and not be overwhelmed by all the scientific terms. So thank you so much for that work. And I have still yet to read your other book. It's on my pile of books. But if I may start a little further earlier, you were a dentist. Have you always wanted to be a dentist?
Yeah, I think so. It was probably 2021, and I was starting to look around and, seriously consider how the rest of my life would play out. And at the time, this was many, many years ago, just saw that there was um, an interesting lifestyle that most of the dentists that I knew, there was no precedent in my family for being, a health professional or anything. So I think I was the first one to come along and decide I was going to, plow that field. And that was really, what it was. I got into college and started to do all the pre-professional, academic work and classes and so forth. And I just fell in love with biology. I fell in love with biochemistry and physiology and how the body works. And all of my advisors kept asking me what my second career option would be if I didn't get into dentistry, and I frankly didn't have a second. It was always this. And I think at the time, I don't remember the exact numbers, but the ratio of applicants to available seats in dental schools at the time was not in our favor. I mean, I don't remember, it was like 1 in 20 or something like that. So the odds were not good. And I just remember all my counselors saying, well, you need to come up with an alternative. And I never really did. And I was blessed, to score well and pass the tests and have a GPA and have, some side projects that were going on that I guess impressed the admissions boards that I may make a good candidate, as a dentist in the future. So as a resident of the state of Washington, I just, Seattle, Washington Dental School was my number one and most likely pick. And it turned out that was exactly, how my life turned out. So I spent time in Seattle and then following graduation, spent some time in public health service and then entered private practice. And so I've enjoyed dentistry ever since.
You did, and you even presided, and you were president and executive board member of the American Academy for Oral Systemic Health. So you were very much involved in guiding other people to this fantastic field of medical field, and you gave so much more time than the regular doctor would. And I've heard about the books that you wrote about this field. I didn't look at them, of course, because I'm not so much into dentistry, but were they for public or were they more for fellow doctors too?
They were more for fellow dentists and physicians. Late 80s, early 90s, there was some new research coming out showing that there was an interesting linkage or connection with the health of the mouth and the rest of the body. And I remember thinking at first, it's like, well, if this is true, if the health of my mouth affects general health conditions such as heart disease, diabetes, and brain neurodegenerative issues and so forth, then I should be working more closely with physicians, and they should be working more closely with me. And that set me on probably a 15-year, maybe even 20-year path of investigating this kind of new concept inside healthcare, literally.
Mm-hmm.
And long story short is I affiliated with a group of health professionals in the Midwest. And when they saw what I was doing privately, they invited me to be a part of that. And we co-founded the American Academy for Oral Systemic Health. And so I began doing some research, and I just went to the literature, the PubMed government databases, because we didn't have any good research that was out there that showed cause and effect. It was just all this, low-level linkages. And anyway, you stitch together 1,000 or 2,000 of these articles, and you come away with a preponderance of evidence type of a conclusion that there has to be a connection. And in the early days, it was really hard to make the point unless you could kind of dogpile and just really have multiple sources. And so I wrote those together, and I created bibliographies and condensed them into books, making the argument that the health of the mouth and the health of the body are connected, we're not trained that way professionally. We have these silos that we are in, and even the insurance side, health insurance or medical insurance and dental insurance are two separate different, third-party payer systems. And so there's this poor recognition across the disciplines, and what that effectively has done over the decades, if not century, is it has taken the mouth outside the body in terms of healthcare. And so there's two separate disciplines. I guess if we could do it all over again, we'd make dentistry a specialty of medicine. By rights, that's kind of how the body's organized, but that's not the way it has played out. So anyway, I gained some, great research experience in researching and writing and making arguments for, why what seems obvious is in fact, I believe is the truth. And that set me on a course where I was invited into this group. I was almost immediately appointed the president and put on the executive board, and basically ran the organization literally out of my own office, answering the phones and whatnot for probably a good year or two, until we could get it up and running well enough that we could move the headquarters to Chicago. And since then, I've passed the baton. I'm a past president. I'm not on the executive board anymore. I'm an advisory board member of that. But that whole experience was a great learning experience. It was a great experience builder in how to connect people and how to talk to people and how to speak in public and how to do rigorous research or examination of the literature. And that has proven helpful as I've become introduced to Asea and redox biology, because that was right out of the gate. That was, the questions I was asking is like, what is this and how does this work? And I needed to prove to myself, at least, that this was a legitimately grounded, scientifically based, idea that we have redox signaling molecules that promote health. And so, all of that being said, the 15, 20 years I've spent, in the other arena, which I'm still in, that's just, what it prepared me to, I think, better look at what this was. Plus my, my undergraduate focus was in biochemistry and physiology, and that was a good grounding in terms of how the body and how the cell works as well.
But that's interesting, because you put so much work and effort, and it's admirable, because not everybody would be willing to put so much time into helping fellow dentists to actually make the connection like you did. But even though you were into biology and biochemistry and you were really scientific nerd kind of, you have never heard of redox until it was introduced to in very unconventional situation in your private life. Could you please talk about that? Because I was fascinated by your story, and it involves your wife.
Yes. Yes, that was, I was not expecting this. I was not looking for it. My wife has had some unique health challenges for probably 4 decades. And we've literally been, it seems, everywhere, at least in the Northwest of the country here, looking for solutions, both conventionally, alternatively, self-help. We just kind of looked at everything. And at one point we were sitting in her doctor's appointment, and I remember making the comment that she seems to be plateauing, like, what else can we do? We've kind of seemed to have tried everything. She's had, a number of surgeries, and anyway, he recommended that we get her on redox signaling molecules. And my side of the story is, I remember looking at him. This is an incredibly astute physician. He's an MD, has a PhD in pharmacological research, spent 6 years in, doing research, and then came back into internal medicine and private practice for many years. And so I really respected what he was doing and was thankful for his help. But I remember looking at him and saying, well, what is redox signaling molecules? And he said, well, just go Google it and get some.
Wow.
And I like said, okay, but what is redox signaling? And he goes, just go Google it and get some. And that was literally the end of the conversation. And I remember kind of shrugging and thinking, oh, okay, I
How
guess I'm
long
going to go
ago?
find it.
How
And
long ago was this happening?
this was in the end of 2018.
Oh, so there
Fall of
wasn't much
2018.
information anyway.
There wasn't a whole lot of stuff. You're right. Anyway, I found someone that had a site. I didn't know what I was looking for. I was just Googling. I was just internet searching, and I said, this looks like what he was talking about. And I ordered some and started doing some, poking around and researching this. And but the kicker was after we got it, it was about 48 hours later, and my wife just kind of it's like she came alive. She just woke up. She was a different person. It was stunning, and it was more so stunning because I know what the last 4 decades have been like. And this was demonstrably different. It was clearly, this wasn't just a fluke. So that caught my attention. I remember texting him back, the physician, and I think I said something like, you would not believe what's happening. And his response was one word with a question mark, and it was, really? It was like,
Yeah.
but I think
Wow.
he was surprised. And we met with him.
To give so long.
Right. Well, he wasn't really involved. I think this was just, he was kind of scratching his head. He was at the bottom of the barrel. He wasn't quite sure where to go with her, and bless his heart. But that was the start of his earnest investigation, because afterwards he goes, wow, that really convinced me to, your wife's experience, to take a look at this. So I went away from that experience, and all this stuff that I'd been doing in the past kicked in. And I'm like, I got to figure out what this is. Well, as it turned out, the week that this was all happening, we were having in Las Vegas, we were having our annual scientific session for AASH, the American Academy for Oral Systemic Health. Mm-hmm. It was going to be a dual meeting with the American College for the Advancement of Medicine. We were looking how to join forces with the medical side and how to bridge the gap, between the two disciplines, and also save money and have a common meeting, under the same roof at the same time, and be more financially, fiscally responsible in how we did our meetings. Anyway, I thought, well, that was the Friday that later that week, and so I got online because I thought I wasn't in charge of the meeting this year, and so I thought before I showed up, I should probably figure out who's speaking and kind of what the agenda was, who the vendors were going to be, so I didn't show up and embarrass myself. I mean, this organization had my fingerprints all over it, and I didn't even know who was going to be speaking. So as I was looking at the vendor list, the exhibitors that would be at the meeting, I saw Asea was listed as an exhibitor. And I'm like, wow, we just had this experience from my physician and this blue bottle stuff, and now they're at my meeting and I didn't even know about it. I'm just like, I'm incredulously curious now. So I noticed that the person who was the contact person for the Asea exhibit was Dr. Maureen Hayes.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know her. I had an email address, so I sent an email to her, just kind of shooting blindly in the dark, thinking, I'm looking forward to meeting you. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this. Maybe you can help me understand why this just happened with my wife. Her response was, I'd be glad to talk, but it won't be Friday because I'm going to be in London. My husband's a physician, stem cell researcher. He has some pig lungs up on the space station, and he's going to be getting an award in London, so I can't be there. Oh. I'm like thinking, who are these people? I didn't know anything else, but it's like, this is, it was kind of weird. But she said, but that there'll be some other people on our team, some other physicians that will be at the meeting, and you can speak with them and they'll tell you whatever you want to know. So I showed up at the meeting and spoke with some of the physicians that were there that turned out to be kind of in my upline, and others that were crossline, obviously, and was able to ask, some questions. I remember asking Dr. Hayes, I said, look, if I ever get into this, because this is like a chicken bone in my throat, please don't tell me it's
not
one
that type.
Yeah, that was a big hurdle for me. I said, if I'm going to ever do this or sign up so I can get the product, can I do it under you? Would you be my sponsor? So that for her, that might have been a little, different or unique, where your people that sign up actually seek you out. But that was my story. And then I came away from that just highly impressed. I could see what was happening. There were some speakers in the medical side of the conference who would stand up in front of the room and talk about these principles. They couldn't speak the name of the company from the stage, obviously, but they would say things like, "Go talk to the people in the back of the room, and they'll answer your questions." And I was really moved. I was really enlightened, and I went home and I started doing the deep dive, because I guess I have a unique form of brain damage. I guess it's like I have to know how electrons move around from molecule to molecule. I needed to know the science. I needed to know it was legitimate. And so I did the same thing again, like I'd done, in the last 10 years with this oral systemic thing. And I just dove into the redox biology, and I found out that it was a thing. I started building, I take notes by just accumulating bibliographies abstracts and summaries, so that I can like put it all in one document. And as I was talking with various physicians about it, in some measure to curiously find out what they knew, to add, but they kept saying, "Well, let me have your bibliography. In fact, why don't you just put it all into a book so I can read that and I don't have to do all my own research?" Anyway, it triggered that, because that's what I've done several times, with other books. And what came out of that after a couple of years was the Redox Matters. And then in writing that, I realized that just talking about the science itself and how cells think, the rules of the cell, didn't really talk about how it applies to normal people and normal lifestyles. And that's where I developed this idea that what we're really talking about here is a redox lifestyle. We look at Asea as being what we call a biohack, is something that we can consume that hacks our metabolic pathways. But more importantly, we need to be understanding that the way our cells work is that it's simply obeying the rules of the cell. These rules of how our cells function already exist. We were designed this way. And we're just kind of coming at it rather directly, I might add, with Asea, with what you could term a biohack, or a solution which starts in motion biological events that support and maintain health. That's the essence of it. And so then Healthy Matters, I wrote that from the standpoint of, this is the lifestyle. And there's actually a lot of things we can do in our lifestyle that support these very same pathways, and which you will come across all the time as you're out and about. We're all very familiar with those lifestyle factors, but nobody really understands why they work. They just know if you eat right, you'll be healthy, or if you exercise, that you'll be healthier. And we just take that on its face value. Of course, if I exercise and eat right and reduce my stress and sleep right, I'm going to be a healthier person. But not very many people can explain to you how they work or why they work, And so that's really what these two books and the research that was involved in them allowed me to conclude, or to discover for myself at least, and write about, was the rules of the cell, and how this blends with those rules to reach these endpoints.
For this, and then you had a private research at your own home, because you have been watching what was happening with your wife and with her health, which is like first-hand private one-person research. Did you take the Redox yourself at that time?
Yeah, after about a week, when I saw what it was doing for her, I thought, I wonder what it would do for me. We made the order. We ordered some extra amount because I started thinking on the side, it's like, well, if it's good for me, it might be good for my patients. I could share it with them. So I ordered a bunch. So I had it there and I thought, well, I'm going to start taking this. And, I'm already starting to get kind of an intellectual understanding of this, but I didn't have a personal experience. I'm actually rather healthy overall. And so I didn't really expect much. But I noticed within a few days, certainly within about a week to 10 days, that I was thinking clearly. My mentation was sharp. My thoughts were pointed. My sleep improved. My bathroom stool, the poop, it said it was different. I could tell a difference, and I just felt better. And that was about the extent of it. And I'll continue that story and fast forward about 18 months. Now it's at this time, March of 2020, and COVID hits. Yeah. And the pandemic shuts my business down. The governor signed a piece of paper, right, along with many other states, governors, where I, as a health practitioner, was not allowed to see patients. And so we were shut down for 2 months. That has an interesting side story that's business related, but at the time, I really wasn't focused on that. That was still a chicken bone in my throat. But one of the side stories for me is as a dentist who is, bending over at sitting at the dental chair, right, after all these years, I'm starting to have pain in my back and my arm and my hand, a lot of discomfort, and numbness as well. And I thought, well, I'm going to be out of work. I'm going to go see the spine surgeon, and I'm sure he can just kind of go in there and roto-root a few places that are maybe calcified and, take the pinch away and fix my problem. And I'll be back to work when they say that we're going to be back to work in May. So I went in and he said, well, that's not going to happen because I'm going to have my own hip replaced while I'm down. So I'm not doing any surgery. And he said, besides, after they did all the evaluation, you're going to have about 7 or 8 or 9 levels that will be fused and you won't go back to work. Oh, for God. So I'm like, okay, this is the best news. And so I remember listening to Jim Glenn's story. He's one of my fellow co-hosts on the Asea 5 Friday night webcast. And his story, that was echoing in my mind about how he, when he started, he really kind of, he boosted his amounts. And, within 3 or 4 months, he noticed that all of his back discomfort was remarkably better. He's off his medications, and you can hear him speak about this, in other places. But that was echoing. I thought, well, I've been taking 2 ounces twice a day for 18 months. I'll up it to 4 ounces twice a day. I'll double it like he did. I'll just see what happened. Within about 5 days, literally 99% of my back discomfort and all of the altered sensations were just gone. I mean,
even the numbness,
they were gone. There was like, I won't say 0, but it was like 99+%. It was different. That was my story. I realized that I just had not been taking enough. I needed to, I never considered myself as the sick person who needed it, right? Yeah. And so, but when I did that and I found out that I have a sweet spot that's just a little bit more than the normal maintenance dose. And I'll say that probably at a 95, maybe even 97% level, I've been able to maintain that, even though some days when I don't really take a full 8 ounces, maybe it's 6 or, 5 or whatever, but that was what changed for me. And so my story now is, in my mind, valid, but up to that point, it was all about my wife. I had witnessed something, and we do this sometimes because we discount our own situations. We say, yeah, I can suffer. I'm okay. I'm still healthy. But when we see a family member or a good friend and where they were at, and all of a sudden it is now demonstrably different, it's like you can't deny that. You're not going to sit there and call them a liar. It's like, it's real. And so that's part of the conversion. So for me, there was this experiential side. There's also this academic side, and they met, where I now know the science. I can talk circles around anybody about the redox biology. Nobody has the drop on me, and so on that, so that's settled. But now the experience side, the feeling side, the gut side, it's like, wow, I'm
It's
in.
something on me personally. Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about, because I have been through 3 back surgeries. And first started when I was just 18 years old. And unfortunately, I didn't know Redox then. And I didn't know my personal trainer, who helped me enormously last several years. And paradoxically, I met him through a dentist, because she was going there with the same issues you have. The same motion, same bending over, develops different discomforts in the back. I was going there because I have different issues with my fused back in the lumbar. So he started specializing in this medical kind of medically challenged different clients. So I would like to ask you, because I have heard you many times speaking so fantastically clear about what that thing we are talking about actually is. I have heard you on the Asea 5, and many times I was like, I wish I recorded it somehow, because you have such a clear way to explain this. And I can imagine somebody may listen to this podcast that never heard of it, never, don't understand what we are even talking about. Is it a medication? Is it a supplement? What the hell is it? You have this gift to be able to say it simply enough to understand what it does in the body, and to answer another question that many people that I meet have. Well, it worked for you, but I don't know if it's going to work for me. And I know your quote that I'm not going to say, because I'm sure you will say it yourself, how it's working for. Who is it working for? if you may go to very simplistically introduce what we are talking about, what the redox signaling molecules actually are.
Well, I'd be happy to. And if anybody wants to do the deeper dive, all those recordings that you were talking about are hosted on redoxmatters.com. There's a video section, and there's hundreds of videos there. You can just sort your way through those, or listen to them in the background, and you'll come across those times when we do talk that way. I guess to start with, to answer your question, everybody, when they try to answer this, including myself, tends to speak too deeply about it, and we lose people. And
it's
so
complex, yeah.
It's very complex. To me, it's very simple and straightforward, obviously, but when I go there, I can quickly lose people. So if there are, physicians or dentists or biologists or whatever, in the audience listening to this, I assure you, there's deeper stuff. We can go deep as you want. But let me just say it this way. I'll start from a functional approach to this, and then we can talk about a little bit of the chemistry if you want. But functionally, think of maybe 5 bullet points. These are tiny molecules. These are nanoparticle, really tiny molecules that are quickly absorbed. We don't even though we're swallowing them, we're not digesting them. These are immediately absorbed, and they get into the body, not just through the bloodstream, but their effect is a cascading domino type effect through the whole body. And they affect what we call regulatory switches. You can just think of them as on-off switches that manage or control in a universal way, control the functions of the body that allow us to respond to stress. And that stress isn't just like, my kids are driving me crazy, the schoolwork is bugging me kind of stress. That could be included. But I'm speaking biological stress, physiological related stress. So we're talking about levels of oxidation in the cell, inflammation. That's how stress shows up, that the kind that produces disease, right? So just think of it that way, as these are tiny molecules rapidly absorbed that cascade through the body, and they affect these on and off regulatory switches that help us respond to stress. If you could memorize those talking points, if you will, you just described what redox signaling molecules are. Now, to speak of them more functionally, the best way is, I think, a metaphor or an analogy of thinking of the thermostat on the wall in your house. If it's a winter day and we opened all the windows and the doors, and or you had a problem somehow, that the ambient conditions of your home became really cold. This thing on the wall called the thermostat has a relay in it that switches on a machine that pumps warm air into your house until the temperature in this thermostat relay box reaches the preset balance level. So when it's now warmed and it's normal, we'll call that balance. In the cell, we would call it homeostasis. But when it hits that balance point, the relay flips and it turns off. It's responding to what the conditions are in your house. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, if something happens and now the temperature is rising and you're 80, 90 degrees in your house, the same mechanism kicks, the relay flips and it turns on a machine, whether it's the same one or a different one, but it now conditions the air and lowers the temperature to that set point where it's comfortable. So that is an example of a responsive, adaptive ability that my house has because of this on-off switch to respond to changes that are going on in the house. Now, if we kind of got absurd just a little bit and said, well, what if those changes, what if it got so hot that, I don't know, plastic in my house melted? I mean, this is a real reach, but yeah. What if there was a consequence, of not
mold developed
back to balance? What if it got so cold that my pipes froze, the water in the pipes froze or something? I realize that's a little more extreme, but it's the same concept, that the damage could happen to the house if this relay, if this responsive regulatory circuit thing didn't do its job to take me back to balance and keep me in a safe, comfortable zone. Furthermore, let's say that there's something wrong with the regulatory switch, this thermostat, the on-off. It's not working as it was designed. Something's not turning it on or off like it's supposed to. And we're kind of like ignorant to this. We kind of don't know what to do. So if it's too cold, we'll go to the closet and we'll layer up with layers of clothing. We'll put sweaters and jackets and coats and extra socks and blankets, and we'll maybe even have a space heater, and we'll gather around a fireplace, just anything to get warm, right? And if it's too hot, the other extreme, we'll turn a fan on, we'll take layers off, we'll throw water on us, we want to cool down, we want to get comfortable. Well, think of those kind of responses, either direction. Think of those as interventions. So now, rather than preventing problems because I have a machine that regulatory manages everything and keeps me or returns me to balance, instead I'm intervening. When something goes wrong, I'm intervening. I've got an intervention. I'm layering up or putting a fan in front of me or something.
But you are dealing with the symptoms.
I'm dealing with the outcomes and the symptoms rather than the core thing. And so I have a phrase that says, awaken the inner doctor. So in the cell, I want to turn on the processes that restore me or put me back into balance. And our objective here isn't necessarily to stay in balance. That's the kind of the irony. It's not to stay in balance as much as it is to be able to return to balance and make my inner doctor stronger, more able, more capable, because we're always going to have these insults, right? These things in life that make us stressed. And that's this redox lifestyle concept. When I go exercise, I'm actually doing damage to my body. This is a stressful thing. My cells don't really like that, and they develop a little bit of oxidation. When I fast, when I go without food, or I simply don't eat carbs, this is kind of beginning of the whole keto movement, the ketogenic type diet, when I'm not consuming carbohydrates or when I'm outright fasting, my cells think, you're starving me. There's no glucose. What am I going to burn for energy, right? And that's stressful, and that creates a little bit of oxidation in the cell. When I eat good food, the reason why it's good is there are phytonutrients or phytochemicals in them. Some people call them nutraceuticals, but these are chemicals that are made in plants that in their world defend themselves against their predators, that when we eat, they aren't necessarily toxic. We call them subtoxic, but they provoke a mild bit of oxidation in the cell, such that I feel a little bit of stress. Mm-hmm. Well, what is the purpose of exercise and fasting and phytonutrients and so on and so forth? What is that? Because that's lifestyle. What is it? What are they doing that makes me healthier? And the answer is they produce a slight bit of oxidation. We call it mild oxidation in the cell, which alters this redox switch, because now I'm out of balance. You see, I'm either too hot, too cold, but I've got a little bit of oxidation. Mm-hmm. And there's a scientific principle called hormesis, Hormesis. Hormesis is a rule in the cell that says when there's a mild bit of oxidation, the cell is like thinking, if this keeps going, I'm going to be damaged. I could die. I don't know. It's not fun, right? It's stressful. So we've got to do something to respond to that in a way that strengthens me. And these are what we call the survival genes or the longevity genes or whatever. There's a lot of different words for them. But it's a mechanism that turns on my cell defenses. I'm now working to recover and get me back to this ambient, even temperature, if you will, this homeostasis. And so the cell turns on and says, oh, you've given me a little bit of oxidation to deal with because you went out and exercised or you ate this way or whatever. So we're going to turn on these cell defense properties, the processes that will create some antioxidants. They will create some cellular repair. We can rejuvenate and repair. We can clean up damaged molecules. We can clean up DNA that's been damaged, proteins that have been damaged, and we will restore you. And in doing so, you will even be stronger now than you were before. Mm-hmm. That's why the rest and recovery phase after exercise is so key, is because I'm now repairing and I'm cleaning up the cell because I activated these cell defense mechanisms. So the bottom line of all that is that when through my lifestyle, I am creating this slight bit of it's too hot or too cold, or I've got some oxidation. That's the rules of the cell that kick in, that turn on these responsive capabilities that reset, restore, repair, rejuvenate, kind of rewind and rebuild my cells to be healthier. And that's why this is anti-aging. That's why I can increase my health span or my longevity. It's why I can recover from all of these things, because the symptoms you were referring to, that I now have to put on extra coats, I have to, or fan myself to get back to, a cooler temperature, whatever. Those are interventions. And when I let this persistent out of balance oxidation, if I allow that to persist and become chronic, or if I make it even more exaggerated and now I introduce toxicity, it's not just mild bit of oxidation, it's a lot of oxidation. I'm way too hot or way too cold. Then I need to go to see a physician and have intervention. I need to intervene with a drug, and thankfully they're there. But I need to intervene with some kind of an agent that will come in and be a drug now, or a surgery, or some kind of intervention that will get me back to what we call health. Mm-hmm. So I really simply just want to turn on my own capability to recover. I want to awaken that interdoctor. I want to make that regulatory redox switch functional. So I consume tiny molecules that provide a mild oxidative stimulus that cascade throughout the body, that has a universal effect on every cell of the body, that affects these thermostats, these on and off redox switches. They're redox sensitive switches that activate this reparative cell protective mechanism that's already in there that restores me to balance. That's in essence what redox signaling molecules are. And it's part of the lifestyle. And it's this biohack that says, yeah, you probably should be exercising and eating right and exercising, stress reduction and sleeping right and so on. I mean, that's all part of our lifestyle modification. But now I can add these redox signaling molecules that will directly turn these switches on at will, like on command. On demand, I can make them functional, and I can turn the thermostat, reset the thermostat, make them more efficient and more functional, like they were when I was younger, when I hadn't gone through, 20 or 50 years of whatever, that kind of ran me down. And now I'm older, and these processes, these switches are not, they're not as responsive as maybe they used to be.
That was my question. I was getting ready to say, why, if our body is capable of producing this on its own, that in a doctor we are born with. The body is a brilliant machine that takes care of many things without us even knowing. Like we pumping blood, we don't do anything for it. Our heart is pumping and we don't do anything for it. So why would we need to supplement these redox molecules when we already have them in us?
Well, it's important to know that these are native. They're part of our immune system functioning. Okay, that's what redox. A redox is a contraction word that means reduction oxidation, and that's just the movement of an electron. I'll come back to that if you'll remind me in a minute. But to your point, this is the difference between lifespan and health span. Because you can kind of think of, we all kind of show up at age, whatever, 40, 50, 60, and we start dying, but we're not dead. It's like if we had a crystal ball and we knew that you were going to die on your 75th birthday, just to be arbitrary here. If we knew that was the end for you, or me, I mean, what I would want would be to be healthy without needing intervention until my 74th year, 360th day. It's like, okay, then get sick and die, right? If I knew that. But what happens is we start dying when we're 50 or 45 or whatever. And we use interventions and surgery and body part replacements and so forth to keep us going so that we can claim, yeah, I'm healthy, right? I take all these drugs and I'm now healthy, right? Correct. It's like, no, you started dying a long time ago and we're just propping you up. We're keeping you going with the interventions until that absolute time. So we just, as we get older and we get past puberty, which most people listening to this are going to say, yeah, that happened a long time ago. These functionalities become less effective. Our body just doesn't function like it used to. We still have signaling. I mean, inflammation is signaling. It's all redox. It's just the movement of electrons. But our reparative, our cell defense, our longevity, our survival genes aren't being expressed as much. And we're experiencing more of the negative signaling, the inflammatory signaling that produces downstream diseases from that. The need to put on the extra coats or to start fanning yourself because I can't get back to balance as well anymore. I can't defend myself.
Is it because that signal is getting quieter and quieter also?
More confused, more toxic, there's just more things. And, I've accumulated more. I'm retaining more. My elimination pathways aren't working as bright. There's more oxidation in my brain. So my neurodegenerative processes start, to be challenged and so forth. So let me go back and this is a little bit of the chemistry of the electrons. Everybody says this is just electrons moving. So let me just give you a quick example. if we went out into your backyard and we lit a campfire, we're going to go cook in the backyard or we just, start a fire in the fireplace, or you turn on your gas stove and you watch the burner light up, right? The question is, why does that happen? Why do we have fire, right? Well, the point is the sun is photosynthesizing with photons all the plant matter that grows around us. It's storing energy, it's storing electrons in the plant matter, and it's stored in the form of glucose and cellulose and wood, or whatever the plant matter is. So it's stored there. These electrons are locked in that, and we call that a reduced state, meaning it's full of electrons. So it's reduced, it's not reactive. Mm-hmm. When we come along and we light a match to it, or we turn the burner on and we put a spark on it, and it flames up, okay, it requires oxygen to receive the electrons. The electrons are moving or oxidizing from the fuel source, whatever it is, to the oxygen molecule, and the oxygen takes the electron away. But in the movement of the electron, there's a thing that happens called heat. There's energy that's created in that as the electrons move. Well, if we took all the oxygen away from your campfire, the fire immediately goes out. You have to have oxygen because it's the movement of these electrons. So now think of the body. We eat this plant matter either directly or through an animal, and they already pre-processed some of it, but we're eating this, and we're eating these, if you will, these electrons. We're storing them now. And in the form of glucose or fatty acids or protein, amino acids, whatever. We eat this stuff that came from the sun. It's now in us, and we're storing it. In our cells, we have a little machine, or a little fireplace, if you will, called the mitochondria, and it takes the glucose and the fatty acids and the proteins, and it burns them through a chemical process. It's not like a spark in an open flame, but it's still combusting, metabolizing that fuel source. There's electrons in the glucose that transfer from the fuel source to oxygen, and in the movement of that electron, energy is created. And that's what powers me. That's what keeps me going, okay, is the energy that we're creating at the cellular level, because I'm metabolizing and combusting this fuel source, and the energy is created when the electron moves. But I have to have oxygen. If I took all my oxygen away, I would die, because that process immediately, it's like putting the fire out. Mm-hmm. So oxygen then becomes the core central thing, because with it acts like a catcher's mitt to receive the electrons. And it's very electronegative, so the electrons want to go toward it. That's what makes the process happen. Historically, what happens is that oxygen molecule, not all of it, not 100% of it, are reduced themselves, and they remain oxidized or oxidants. And for decades, we have taken antioxidants to put the fire out, to squelch the fire so it doesn't damage us internally. Right. We don't want oxidation in that sense. And so we've got a multi-billion-dollar industry that's grown up around this idea of putting out the fire, of reducing the oxidants with these available electrons that I can get from vitamins, okay? Mm-hmm. Well, what we found with this Asea discovery is that some of those reactive molecules, we call them reactive oxygen species, some of these reactive molecules are, think of what we were just talking about a few minutes ago, these are what causes this mild bit of oxidation in the cell. It's a redox state. And that's what triggers or turns on these genes that restore me to health. So we have built into us, into the rules of the cell, a kind of an automated system that says, when you give me just a little bit of oxidation, however you do that, just even living and breathing and eating and running or fasting or whatever, or through a biohack, when you create a little bit of oxidation, I'm going to activate some genes that will turn on and make you stronger. Mm-hmm. And so my point is this is a very native, natural, this lives very naturally in our cells, and it's the discovery of this is how the cell works. We're not doing anything magical. We're just saying, this is biologically how cells think. And when they have a mild bit of oxidation, they have to obey this rule of hormesis that activates gene expressions across the board. It's universal. All of the redox sensitive thermostats, or we call them transcription factors, they kick on, they respond, they rebalance, and they turn off. And that happens zillions of times. And we're just tapping into it with these redox signaling molecules. And that's why this is so fun. I love explaining. Hopefully that wasn't too deep.
No. I'm loving it. I'm loving to. I love to listen to you. You have a really great way of talking about it. And as you talk, questions come to my mind. It was like, when somebody listens to this and still thinks, can this possibly work for me? Because I know it worked for his wife, and I know it works for him, and it works for him. But what if it doesn't work for me?
So here's my response. They always work. These are the rules of the cell. You provide these, you satisfy these rules, they work. Now, what doesn't work sometimes is our own definition of what does work mean. Because I have a drug mindset. I'm used to interventions. When I take a drug, it can make my pain go away, and it can do it in 30 minutes, right? When I take a drug, it can fix my whatever, my blood pressure, you name it. I mean, that's what the intervention is for. So there's usually kind of a measurable thing or indicator that says it's working, right? Mm-hmm. It would be like saying, well, if I take aspirin for my headache and it doesn't work, what we're saying is it didn't take away 100% of my headache, but did it take 50% of it away? I don't know. I mean, you're the judge of that, but does that mean it's not working? Well, my point is, it always works. It's scientifically impossible for this not to work. But what can vary is maybe how much I need. Everybody has a different set point, because I have different history. I have different medical issues, right?
Collection of medical issues, yes.
Right. And that's kind of also, it's about hormesis. It's like you might require a little bit more or less to effectively change this situation, the way the cells respond.
And also the age and the lifestyle that the person have.
Yeah, and you could have all this toxicity already have built up. You're full of this stuff, of toxicity, and it might take longer, or it might take more initially for you to get past that log jam, if you will. And so that's why I always caution people to say, let's make sure that we've discussed your expectations first.
Yes.
And I usually do that by saying, if you are particularly unhealthy, if you've got a lot of issues health-wise, you might want to double or triple up on this for the first month or two, or it's going to take longer. You didn't get sick in a month. It took you years to get to this point where you're suddenly needing. It takes years before you finally, I mean, you don't feel high blood sugar. Yes. You don't feel high blood pressure. You are told that you have it when you have a lab test. You're going, oh, I didn't know that. But it takes a while, because it took years to get to that point of metabolic imbalance, of metabolic disease processes going on. So when you do anything like this, you have to have that reasonable expectation and just say, I mean, what if you never felt it? Could you rest assured that you were preventing? I mean, there's another angle to this. So anyway, bottom line is, I tell people not to get too worked up over that. This at least is a preventive thing. It always works. You might need more. And in fact, it might work so well that you will know it works because it makes you feel worse to start with. You might be detoxing. Suddenly your cells have the ability to get rid of all these toxic, whatever, molecules. And you can't eliminate them fast enough. You're still, things aren't working like they need, and you might need to slow down. You might just need to acclimate longer. Everybody's got a different thing. So it always works.
There's also one thing that I would like to touch on, and you may want to talk to it. When somebody comes to you with a certain issue that they have on their mind, that they would like this to work for. But it's not always the decision of the person where the molecule starts to work first. It may, I have read somebody online said, well, but I didn't lose weight. I was like, well, this doesn't claim to be weight loss product. But you know, it's people have, like you said, the mindset and the expectations are so important, because we take vitamins. Do I feel that I'm doing something for my body? No, I take vitamins because I believe they will help me or prevent things.
Exactly.
And exactly like you said, I have my own personal experience within first week of taking Redox. But then I didn't feel anything. But then a few months later, I had my blood work done, and I realized my cholesterol went down 60 points without medication, without any change in my lifestyle. And I have been talked to for several years that I need to go on statins, and I didn't want to. It on its own balanced itself out. So, like, to your point, you don't feel you have higher cholesterol, and you don't feel when it lowered down. It just does. And it showed on the blood work.
Yeah, and we have to be really careful in these discussions, because, you know, here's the disclaimer, is that this is a supplement. We don't claim to treat or diagnose or prevent anything. What we're doing is turning on the mechanisms that awaken the inner doctor. We're just making the cell more responsive so that it can affect this gene expression, these gene pathways. That's what we're doing. And if some people will say, well, it targets the problem areas, you know, like women would say, well, will it target my cellulite? And it's like, I don't know. It's going to every cell in your body, even your hair cell, whatever your hair follicles are. You know, my wife made, it was after she was going on this a while. She says, I think I need to see the eye doctor. I've got these dark lines around my eyes and I can't get rid of them. And 2 or 3 days later, she came laughing to me and she said, no, we don't need to. I just realized that my eyelashes are growing back. So wow. It's turning cells on all over. It didn't target, you know, her eyelash follicles. Right. It's not targeting your cellulite or your joints. You know, that's not the point. It's universal. It affects all cells. And if a group of cells or an organ or what some physiological, you know, system is already impaired, well, it will help them function better. But I can't tell you that that's going to result in any list of things, you know, that you could hopefully do it and see, you know. But you should be you should be eating right and sleeping right and fasting and exercising and stress reduce. You should be doing all that anyway, you know. And you can't just use this or any biohack and say, well, I'm just going to do this and sit on the couch with my remote and watch people exercise. You know, it's like, no, you got to, this is an adjunct. It's assisting you doing what you should already be doing.
When you taking supplements, when you're taking steps into better health, how Redox play to it? Does it improve the effect of all of you taking already in your body? Does it make it work better?
I mean, you could technically argue the cell doesn't know the origin of these redox signaling molecules. It doesn't know whether you ate a vitamin to get that or whether you exercised. You know, from a strict physiological biochemistry, all it knows is that there is a slight bit of oxidation that turned the switch on. How you got there, you can get there through other pathways as well, which is lifestyle. What we're saying is that with Asea Redox Signaling Molecules, I can do it like that. I can put it on board and create that state, and I can maintain that and keep it functioning at a level. And yes, I should be doing all these other things because there's other aspects to health. There's strength, there's mobility in joints, you know, there's other things that create inflammation. You need to eat right. I talk about when I presented at the Asea conference, the medical meeting in Vegas last, I talked about a concept called Redox Clean. And it's like, you can eat garbage and toxicity and pesticides and on, and you can muck up the system. You can make them, I think of contaminant or something, that you're just not clean. It's not smooth flowing because you're onloading things that dumb up the works. Yeah. Well, that's going to impair if you're not living a healthy lifestyle, and you say, well, I'll just sit there on the couch and drink this stuff and that'll fix everything. It's like, that's not the whole picture. This is an adjunct, and it's a very powerful one.
So what going back to you personally, when you learn all that, when you saw your wife turning around within 48 hours, which is insane after decades and decades of declining, when you saw on yourself that it has effect, you start noticing things that affected you, what was the turning point for you when you said, oh my God, this is worth spreading around? Everybody needs to know about this.
The answer to that is that the answers live in your head and your gut. Intellectually, you can know a lot and be knowledgeable and so forth, but that doesn't mean you're going to go do anything. And there's probably more to that than we have time to get into for myself. I just was not a fan of networking. I didn't want to be that. I didn't want to introduce that to my practice. I didn't want to ruin my practice because I got a kind of a wild hair in my ear, about networking and so forth.
Yeah, there's many people that have big issues with that.
This is an issue because we've spent 50 plus years, and there's been some bad apples in the industry of networking. But what I have become convinced of in this situation is to not confuse the model, the business model, that it's just a machine. Think of it as a box. When you crank the handle on the side of the box, money comes out. And when you don't crank the box, nothing comes out. It's a spreadsheet. You put numbers at the top, and the formulas in the spreadsheet kick out a result at the bottom. It doesn't know who you are. It doesn't know your experience. It's just inanimate. If you just crank the handle, it's a compensation plan. Now the question is, well, what are you going to power the compensation plan with? What is this thing that you're doing that creates this income? It's just a formula. It's just math, right? Well, that's where Asea for me kicked in, because I met with the executive team. I toured the plant. I saw what they're doing. I did the research. I'm checking I was like, yep. And then it was just like, does this company have the integrity and the ethos to make this happen for me? And
do I want to risk my professional reputation with this? Yeah.
Do I enjoy rejection? Do I enjoy people mocking me? Like, why don't you just get a real job? Kind of a thing. But then you start realizing that the business model that this is grounded on, this networking, is a powerful way to leverage, because you can leverage other people. And this takes it a step above anything you can do in real estate, which is leveraging other people's money. Yeah. There's still an obligation when you leverage other people's money. You have to make good on that. When you can leverage other people and their efforts, and you can put those people around the globe, I can now earn income, residual income, around the clock, even while I'm sleeping.
Yeah,
because I've organized.
What happened to COVID and your practice?
I go back to my practice, and that has become a motivating factor for me. That is, I do not ever want anybody else to have control of my income again. And through this machine, through this compensation plan, through this company, literally, if someone's listening to this, we could argue that any network marketing company can do the same thing conceptually. But why I like about this is that everything comes together. And in a counterintuitive way, they have done a fabulous job in taking this to the next level. And so it's not about money, 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 income, 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 sell, sell, sells, product, product, product. It's about become better. It's about becoming. It's about let me help you solve your problems. It's about helping other people, who are destitute sometimes. And if we've got time still, I can kind of go into that if you'd like, about how
if you don't mind, I'm not in a hurry. I love our conversation.
You might have to break this up into two parts. I don't know.
That's okay.
So here's what doesn't work for me. What doesn't work for me is to get all rah-rah and, chest thumping and jump up and down and turn the music up. And I'm not saying that you couldn't change your state, your physiology and emotion and get excited about something. But for me, I'm just speaking me, money and things that money can buy doesn't motivate me. That I'm not going to say that's a non-starter, but that's not what keeps me going. I look at this in this way. What is it that lives so deep in your gut that would cause you to walk across glass to get there? What is it that would cause you to walk across the tightrope from a high spot to a high spot into another, to a burning building on the other side? Why would you walk across the tightrope? You couldn't pay me $1 million, to walk across the tightrope into a burning building unless my kid was over there.
Right.
If there were children over there. So for me, I've learned, and I'm actually writing another book right now. It's going to be submitted in a short while on why it matters. It's like, what's in your gut? What is it that drives you, that wakes you up, that gets you out of bed, that almost doesn't phase you? I'm not saying things shouldn't phase you, but like it would just be of no matter. It's like, I don't care. I'm doing this for that. And that is for me, to wrap myself around a cause such as children who are being trafficked into slavery, sexual assault, these issues for me, especially of children, that's a cause, and I can wrap myself around it. And isn't it wonderful that Asea particularly has an Advancing Life charitable foundation arm to it that allows us to donate to it and to participate in it in a way that allows me now to make a claim. I now have a cause, because when I donate to this, when I make this company successful, it creates money that I can support causes like Operation Underground Railroad. It enables them to put forensic teams together. It enables them to train dogs that will sniff out electronic storage devices that contain illicit material that are being used in these pedophilia circles. It allows us to respond, as they have, to what's going on in Ukraine when the bombings took place, or still taking place. And it's a race in time between the traffickers, who call this harvest time, and the rescuers to go in and get these children. Like, who's going to get to them first? And then what happens afterwards, after we get the kids? Where do they go? What's the aftercare? Who takes care of them? Who does the therapy? Who puts clothes on their back? There's just, this goes on and on. Well, these are things that are deep in my heart. This is the fire in my belly. And so the practical application of that from a business point of view is, yes, I get the science, I get the health benefits. I'd love to help you resolve your health issues. But the reason why I stay in the game, in part, is also because I want to make donations to and support this cause that's bigger than me. It's about the kids. I want to support these causes, and I can do it locally. I have local charities and ministries in my own community that are also very active. And if whoever's listening to this looked in their own community, you'll find nonprofits, you'll find ministries, you'll find churches, you'll find apolitical organizations, public organizations not affiliated with any kind of a church or denomination, and they're all working on this issue of rescuing children and providing the aftercare to have them reassimilate, and gain their life back. And so you can support those local ones as well and be involved and show up. And now you can go to their meetings and their events and make contributions. And this becomes magnetic. It becomes attractive in the sense that the fire in your belly is not, I'm going to make money selling Asea molecules. It's that I'm involved in a project that rescues children, and I'm using this side business, this side hustle, to help me in that process. And that becomes magnetic. That becomes attractive. Your why is what you're selling, not your product. And in that regard, the money, the beach houses, the things that money can buy, that we might jump up and down and clap our hands and shout rah rah, affirmations about, is the byproduct. It still can happen, but it's the byproduct, because what really drives me is this core why. Why am I doing this? I'm doing it to help people, to resolve their health issues, to rescue children. You layer on that whatever it is that is the fire in your belly, whether it's animal rescue or whatever the cause is, you have to find your why. And with that why, that becomes why you're doing this. Anyway, I've packaged a lot in there, but for me now, I've been able to overcome. I still think that there's this chicken bone in here. There's a still 7-year-old boy sitting on my shoulder that talks to me. And I don't, I know enough about psychology that the game isn't about kicking that little boy away, because he's just there.
Yeah.
But it's about saying, well, thank you for sharing, go away. I have a deeper why. This is what gets me to walk across glass. This is why I would walk across that tightrope. And yeah, I get that you don't think this is legitimate or whatever, but I'm not going to tuck my tail between my legs, because I'm here to rescue children.
Yeah.
And maybe you'll see that someday, right? Or whatever your why is. So for me, I look at the machine that is the compensation plan and realize that when I crank the handle, money comes out. I can leverage myself. I can leverage other people. I can tap into a multi-million-dollar infrastructure that was already created just for me. I don't need to do anything about creating products. I don't need to do anything about all the regulatory rules, the compliance rules, the taxations, the product development, the research, the chemists involved. I don't have to come up with any of that to start a side hustle. It's already done for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all I have to do is set this machine in motion that starts sharing with people, and they send me checks. And it's pretty simple.
But at the same time, this is wonderful, because we all have that invisible somebody sitting on our shoulder day in and day out. And it is definitely about personal growth as well when you deal with something like that. And I remember at the beginning, somebody would laugh and it easily turns you off, because the ego kicks in as well. Was I stupid before I talked to you, or did you always thought I was stupid? Because
exactly.
suddenly you don't trust obviously I didn't come with something that I just heard about. I'm coming to you with something that I did deep research on, that I tested on myself, that I have seen, studies about studies. It's not a joke. But there's one thing that I would like to touch on, because this product is not comparable to anything that is on the market right now. How so?
You say, why is it not comparable?
How is it sitting on its own, kind of?
Well, it's a new category because it's regulated by supplement rules in the United States in the FDA. It's not a drug. It was originally, people can watch the Genesis video, on their own and see the backstory as to why this became technically a supplement in the FDA. But it is a new category because it doesn't intervene. It's not a molecule that is finding a receptor site like a drug has to, you see. So it's a different class, and that really has no equal, and it's protected by, everybody thinks that it's all this patent protection. It's like, yeah, there's some good patents, but patents are also publicly disclosed. You just can't copy them for a number of years.
Yeah.
But it's the trade secrets that make this tight. It's the trade secrets. It's like you can't duplicate this process. To be able to stabilize reactive molecules, those reactive oxygen species, after you electrolyze them, to be able to stabilize those, to create a shelf life so that you have a product. I mean, making electrolyzed molecules is not hard at all. You can buy home units that do that. I've got one in my closet. That's not the point. You make them and they perish almost immediately.
Yeah.
You have a short shelf life with them, so there's no product there. But to make them in their pure form and to make them stable, that's the key. And nobody can, in my opinion, will be able to do that for a very, very, very long time. So we do stand apart. We are unique because we have the science, we understand it, and it is a considerable ramp up time for anybody to come along and say, well, we're going to duplicate. It's like they have a lot of tough sledding ahead of them if they think they're going to do that. And so in the meantime, we're the standard. We own Redox. We own the space that is unique and is a new category. And that's because of that, it's like you don't have competition. I mean, what a unique place to be in.
Yeah.
We're going to start a business that has no competition and everybody needs.
And literally everybody needs. Yeah.
We're not just talking about we have a fancy new makeup. Well, number one, only women are going to want that. And number two, only the people that are into makeup want that. I mean, you start, the market becomes, no, we have what, 8 billion people that each have, 70 trillion cells. It's like everybody
can benefit from
redox signaling and to do it better. And so it's a wonderful marketplace, and we are unique in that regard.
And one thing that I believe is also unique is that is native to our body, which means nobody can be allergic to it.
Yeah.
That cannot be said about any other product on the market either.
Yeah, we often call that it's transparent to medication, but because it's native, it has no toxic ability. And we knew that from the original biotech company that was trying to become a drug. That's why they couldn't become a drug, is because they couldn't kill anything. Ironically, they couldn't get a lethal dose.
Or anybody.
Yeah.
Wow, isn't it sad state of drug industry? Wow. Dr. Ostler, this was absolutely fantastic discussion. I'm so grateful to you. And we took so much longer than was planned, but I hope you don't mind. And I hope our listeners wouldn't mind, because this was a source of wisdom on your part to kind of introduce to people that never heard of it how significant this thing is.
Tell your listeners to pop some popcorn. This is better than Netflix.
For sure. For sure. I tell them to have a glass of wine with Dr. Maureen. That's why we are good friends. We love our wine. But is there one thing that you would like to say goodbye with? One thing that you would like to stay with people to take away from this?
I think that the takeaway, is back to this simplicity, the simpleness of the concept of on both sides now. The goal here is you want to awaken your inner doctor. That's the goal. I mean, everybody has a different starting place. This doesn't make us immortal. We're not going to live forever. But what we want is to have a healthy health span, a healthy lifestyle. So awaken the inner doctor, but at the same time, look at this from the idea of, how about if you decide to awaken your financial genius? There is a way to leverage yourself so that you're not just trading your time for dollars. One of the things that I'll call him my rich dad, if you understand that reference, Jim Glenn, he's kind of the money guy, right? He laments that in his brokerage career, he was a stockbroker. So in his financial services career, his toughest problems were dealing with people whose lives were interrupted with real life. And they had their pensions, they had their savings, they were, and then all of a sudden they had a life event. There was a heart attack, a stroke, a dementia, a business that would burn down, or a divorce, or a reversal, something happened. And all of a sudden they were having to pull their savings just to survive. Well, when you do that, you don't have your 20 years all over again that it takes to build that back up. You're now 40 or 50. And I can remember having I was kind of arrogant, kind of having a conversation with him saying, I don't know, I'm sure this is what he heard. I didn't say these words, but it's like, I'm a hotshot health professional. I can make my money, and I'm middle life now. I'll be okay, right? I've had some business reversals. You can read about that in the upcoming book. I talk about that. And he said, no, you can't. And I said, yeah, I can do it. I can knock it out and make the money and retire fine. He goes, no, you can't. And we kind of had this, no, you can't. Yes, I can. And he goes, I said, why not? And he goes, because of the rule of 72. And I'm like, okay, what's the rule of 72 mean? And he goes, 72 divided by the interest rate you pick is the number of years that it takes to double your money. And he said, you don't have enough time left to double your money enough times to equal to anything significant that you're going to need. And then he said, $1 million sitting in an account earning 6% interest is $5,000 a month. Now, and then he said, look at your life, and if we chose 6%, is what you have going to, do you have enough time for it to double and then double again to get to that amount that would produce $5,000 a month? And furthermore, 24 years from now, because 72 divided by 6 is 12 years. So 12, 24 would be 2 doublings. By the time 24 more years goes by, 24 years in the future, is $5,000 a month going to be enough? I mean, it just all of a sudden this sat on me, and I thought, I have to do something different. I have to have a side hustle. I have to have side income. And this is where the whole idea of MSIs come from, multiple streams of income. Whatever you're doing now, you could be the most wonderfully educated, great job, but it could go away with a signature. It could go away with a lockdown. It could go away with a new pandemic. It could go away with whatever. And by the way, we should probably be getting healthy and getting prepared for those eventualities. But at the same time, we should awaken the financial genius in us and find a side hustle that leverages my time, that leverages other people's efforts, so that I can create a residual income stream that earns money while I sleep, that grows, that equals or is the same thing as if I had $1 or $2 or $5 million in the bank, spitting off some passive amount of interest income. It's the same thing from a cash flow point of view. Those are all things that will be coming out in Wyatt Matters, which is the book that will be coming out within the next month. So
you are extremely productive man. They always say, ask those busy people to do more, and they always do. You are incredible.
Just drink lots of Asea.
Yeah. Yes.
Makes me sharp.
We only, and I can tell you, after my third surgery that I had back in 2008 or 9, I believe, I was left with significant sciatic nerve pain going down to my left leg. I was not able to sit for 40 minutes. I was not able to drive long distances. I was not able to sit through a movie or dinner with a friend without shifting in my chair, getting up or doing something. We are now on for an hour and a half. Did you notice that I didn't shift once? It's a big deal to me.
Well, again, we should probably conclude with a disclaimer that, we don't.
I always do.
Yeah, good. I'll let you do it then.
I always do. I have it either under my show every time. This
Good.
is not, we are not talking about something that is designed to cure, heal, or prevent anything. We are turning, by the words of Dr. Ostler, turning our inner doctor in. That's all we are doing. And that's actually explains when you turn that bottle around and look at the ingredients as we are trained to do, and look at the water and what is there, sodium chloride.
The saline, yeah.
And that's kind of explaining why this product doesn't sit on every store shelf or at the gas station, or why it is not distributed the regular channels, because nobody would understand what this thing really is. Yep. This is not a salt water.
That's correct. And people that get hung up on that, the saline is just the carrier vehicle for the reactive molecules that are suspended in it.
That's what exactly body makes it from.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Vera, I have thoroughly enjoyed this.
Me too. I am so stunned that you, thank you so much for giving me so much time. It was very generous of you. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Well, let me just encourage everybody. Let me encourage everybody who's listening now or later, to get with the person that invited you here. Come listen to us every Friday night at 8 p.m. Central on Discover Asea. We do the Asea 5. We talk with health professionals and business people.
And I love that.
Do your due diligence. Yeah, do your due diligence, and you have nothing to lose. Maybe except a sore body. I don't know. So.
And also, if you really are a little nut for science, make sure you seek these 2 books.
Yeah, those are at redoxmatters.com, but thank you for the plug.
I love them thoroughly. I seriously, if you remember our first meeting in Vegas when I asked you to sign it for me, there was a several pages twisted because I keep going back to it, reference. You have done fabulous job for somebody like me who needed some proof, and not only what it did for me, but I wanted to see that there's science behind it. I wanted to see that I can trust it, and you have done that for me. And see, there's there's stuff. I'm using it as my textbook. So, and there's plenty of research materials about redox. This is something that is most kind of consumable for me, and it's understandable, and it's being, and I have purchased some books and gave it to people that I want them to read it, because many people need some convincing and need to understand why it works and how it works in the body, in able to make that leap. But I just, my heart aches every time I see somebody struggling that I know would benefit from it, and they wouldn't even take a look, which is really sad. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad your wife has discovered this with you, and it led you to that trip. And you were into biochemistry at the beginning, and you ended up there. Unplanned trip.
That's just how life works. Biologically and in a lot of other ways. What we've done prepares us for where we're at.
Well, hopefully we will see each other again this year, maybe at the convention. Thank you so much again. I was so grateful that you gave me so much time. And
thank you.
Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Okay? I will. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.